Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday. It's so good to see all of you virtually. Before we begin, just be sure that you're sitting comfortably and you have something to write with, maybe a journal or maybe just a piece of paper you've got laying around, something to write with. And if you do have someplace you can sit quietly uninterrupted, be sure to do that. Today is a little bit more diving deeper than we usually do each Saturday. So go ahead and make sure you're somewhere you can be where you're not going to be disturbed. Also, if you have the two oils, the blends, balance, and elevation, grab those. We'll use those in our meditation this morning. Okay, so go ahead and close your eyes. Let's get started. Today's live is all about when you're at your lowest, how you can trust completely and take advantage of that moment, that perspective to uncover a new understanding. So close your eyes, begin to connect with your breath. Thank you all for joining this morning. If you're just joining us, be sure to sit somewhere you're not going to be interrupted. Grab a pencil and paper or your journal. So nice to see your faces joining. So in talking about this experience that we all go through when we're at the valleys of our lives rather than the peaks, this is what life is about, the ups and downs, they're bound to happen. How can we be in a place of receptivity? It's at these times when we question whether or not God has our back or Source has our back, whether others are there to help us when we're feeling low, whether we're going to make it. Sometimes we wonder, am I going to make it through this? And is there something in your life, or maybe go back to that last time where you felt like this, that you can bring into your mind in the visualization right now? And if you do have balance oil, if you have balance with doterra, go ahead and put that on the soles of your feet and come back to your visualization. And if you don't, just feel the groundedness, this color red or brown in that root chakra, beginning to root you into the earth more fully, connecting with your body. Or I'll put this oil on the bottoms of your feet. Just getting present where you are right now and what that last challenging thing was for you. Today, I'm also going to share with you one of my favorite quotes of all times, because it was her feast day on September 5th, Mother Teresa. So I'll start with that quote, and I want you to keep that time when you felt your lowest in your heart, in your mind's eye, knowing that you're not there right now, or maybe you are. And if you are, that's okay. We're going to work with it together this morning. I want you to feel what you were feeling. I want you to feel where it was in your body, what disappointment was there, or what devastation or those feelings of sadness or grief or anger, frustration that we all go through. We have the highs and the lows, but we're focusing on where that low is today or where it was recently, so that we can uncover a different way of relating to it. So as you're breathing, just let yourself soften as much as you can internally and open your ears this morning. So this quote by Mother Teresa, you might be familiar with it. People are often unreasonable, irrational, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you will win some unfaithful friends and some genuine enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and sincere, people may deceive you. Be honest and sincere anyway. What you spend years creating, others could destroy overnight. Create anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, some may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today will often be forgotten. Do good anyway. Give the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give your best anyway. In the final analysis, it is between you and God. It was never between you and them anyway. That's Mother Teresa. So in that visualization, as you're thinking about a time where you are struggling, and that time may be today, let those words reverberate inside of you. Remembering that whatever you're struggling with, whatever you're giving, whatever you're creating, all of it could be gone tomorrow. But that in the moment that you are here right now, that you do your best, that you be good, you be happy, you succeed, and you be kind, or forgive others, regardless of what they do, to return to more of your natural state, like a child. And that Mother Teresa, in her feast day in Catholicism, she was canonized a saint, so September 5th is her feast day, that she gave her life, and it was never enough. There are still poor, there are still hungry. And these beautiful words of hers remind us to not focus on what's not working or what's still left to be done, but to celebrate what we have done, what we have accomplished, and to let the rest go. So how do we trust this source energy when we're at our lowest? And feel free, if you want to jot some notes down of what's coming up in that visualization, feel free to do that. This is for you, remember. And in order to let go, I also really love using this oil elevation. It's a doterra blend to really let go, to let God, let go, let God. We've heard that. Let go, trust that source energy. And I put it right on my solar plexus, right on that center point where we like to control things. Like how do we really regain our sense of power and let go at the same time in these moments that are so difficult? You can also put this right on the top of your head. And this sense of elevation, what this oil blend does for me is just reminds me that I'm not in control. I can do only so much, and the rest I have to let go. So what is something in relationship to that thing that you're working with this morning, that challenging aspect to your life? Where is an area you can let go of, knowing that you do not have control over it? And also trusting that law of dichotomy, that law of as things rise, things will fall, or as things, what goes down must come up, that in our life we have these mountains and we have these valleys. If you're in that valley, or at those times when we're in those valleys, how can we trust that those peaks are coming back up? But not just wait and suffer and hope that sometime soon things will get better. I want to ask you this morning and challenge you this morning, how can we fall in love with those darker times? And I don't mean that we want to attract them and keep them going and bring on the pain, bring on the darkness, bring on those valleys in our life. But those valleys are teaching us if we know how to handle them. Just like the waves of a surfer as they crest and they crash and they dip this way and that way. How can the surfer ride those waves, listen to their lessons and their guidance so that he or she can have a full expression of a ride? How can we have a ride through those peaks and those valleys? Now, living out in Colorado, Anthony and I recently went to go up into the mountains to one of the highest peaks, Mount Evans, the closest 14,000 foot mountain to Denver. And we got to see such beautiful sights up at those peaks. We got to see mountain goats and bighorn sheep and marmots and beautiful, beautiful animals, and got to look out and see Denver as this little tiny spot in the distance. And it was beautiful. And it took a long time to get up there to that peak. And along the way on our drive up there, we saw some beautiful mountains with these incredible, gorgeous houses on the tops of these cliffs overlooking the valleys below. And they were stunning. And we thought, wow, wouldn't it be incredible to have one of those houses one day where we can look out and see everything below us. Look out and see the furthest peaks and all the way down and see the valleys below us. But what we're taught, and especially with, I wanted to also share with you one of my favorite sources, which is the Tao Te Ching. There is a passage in the Tao, and it talks about how do we take advantage of those valleys in our lives when we're experiencing them. And if you think about it, what's really incredible, I know there's something called the continental divide in the mountains. And it's something that fascinated me when I was little, growing up in Colorado. And having just relocated from New York City and rediscovering a lot of these wonders in my life that taught me so much about life and taught me so much about pain and all of the highs and the lows. And the Continental Divide, those of you who do know about this, is a peak that runs all the way from the top of Canada all the way down to the tip of South America. And that peak, that ridge, wherever it rains, whether it's on the east side of that peak or on the west side of that peak, the rainfall goes into the Pacific or it goes into the Atlantic or the rivers that eventually pour into the Atlantic, which fascinated me as a little girl because I thought, wow, it's raining right now. And I would be up at the Continental Divide and say, all right, that raindrop is going to go in this direction and this raindrop is going to go in this direction. I was so fascinated by that. Didn't take too much, it still doesn't, to just make me absolutely in awe and wonder at this life. And when you think about that, the river of life and the Tao, I know is one of my favorite influential spiritual texts, is a lot about water. And being like water, or allowing that influence of God or source in our life to be like water. And where does that water run to? It doesn't stay at the peak. It doesn't stay at the top of that Continental Divide, or it doesn't stay up at that house, that multi-million-dollar house overlooking the valley. Where does it run to? It runs to the valley. It runs to the very bottom. It runs to those rivers, carving out the stone throughout the millennia. Water carving is so much more powerful. It carves stone over time. And it carves out within us, if we allow ourselves during those times where we're at the valleys of our life, that we are the most receptive. It is in those moments where we have that water come to us, that source of life, that river of life, and guide us in that way. And yet, what do we usually do in our boats? We don't go upstream, or like the nursery rhyme says, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. We're usually paddling and going upstream and doing our best to really exhaust ourselves and fight those valleys in our life, rather than actively rowing with the guidance and the force of God or universe or whatever we give that name. It doesn't matter. Whatever that guiding force is that's taking us downstream in the direction that we're flowing. How do we row, row, row gently down the stream? And we'll continue with that nursery rhyme. What does it say? 4 times over, merrily, 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 merrily. Not just one time, but merrily. To do this with joy, to do this with peace in our hearts, to do this with the awe of a child, to merrily remind ourselves that life is but a dream. What are we learning in those moments? What is unveiling when we're in those darkest moments and we're paddling down the stream? We have the current and we think we shouldn't be going in a certain direction, and we paddle upstream fighting it, trying to resist what's coming and this water that keeps coming. And I don't know if you've ever been in that, but I know whitewater rafting, man, it is tough to go upstream. You just can't. You have to go downstream. A surfer doesn't go against the ocean wave. It goes with it, but helps to steer his surfboard, just like steering that raft downstream. You're not just floating passively. But when we're in the most tumultuous waters and times in our life, how do we remind ourselves that this and the direction that we're going is ultimately for our greatest good? It's taking us eventually through all of those rapids and those tumultuous waters with those rocks and those obstacles that we have to get around or move through to get to those calm waters again, where we can look up and we can see this beautiful perspective. Those of you who know have been floating through a river where it's super calm. I think about the river in Phoenix where we visited our friend Brian Golub. And we went on this beautiful river and we were just coasting on tubes, looking up at the beautiful sights around us. But in those moments where we're going through those rapids, you don't think you're going to make it. But all of that can be seen as a perspective for our highest good. So as Mother Teresa was saying in her beautiful quote, "Do it anyway," that you could be creating something that's destroyed overnight. That's something that we go through when we create in life, whether it be a relationship or a business or a community or your health. Whatever it is, keep creating anyway. Keep the faith anyway. And in this beautiful, it's a 28th verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's called, well, one of my favorite influences is Dr. Wayne Dyer. And he wrote a book that I didn't put it in the notes, I'll put it in the book notes. It's called Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. And he takes each verse of the Tao Te Ching and he expounds on it as a daily practice. So in this verse, one of the most incredible things is he says, and this is written by Lao Tzu, an incredibly wise man, millennia ago. And he says, "Know the strength of man, but keep a woman's care." It's that balance of the dichotomy of life, that masculine and that feminine. And it says, "Be a valley under heaven. If you do, the constant virtue will not fade away. One will become like a child again." He talks about being like that valley, being in that lowest point, to look up like a child and to see the world around you through fresh eyes, even though you feel like you're at your lowest. How can you ask yourself in those moments, what am I learning here? Wow, look at this world around me. This pain, this pleasure, the highs and the lows, the law, what I call the law of dichotomy, this good, bad, right, wrong, holy, evil. How am I moving through life like a child and learning what happens when I do this and what happens when I do that? And looking through those eyes to be receptive to the graces of God or that source energy, that guiding force, like a river, and being receptive to that waterfall, that guiding force. It goes on to say, know the black, keep to the black, or know the white and keep to the black. There's those dichotomies again. And be the pattern of the world. To be the pattern of the world is to move constantly in the path of virtue without erring a single step, and to return again to the infinite. What does this mean? Know the black, know the white, keep to the black, and be the pattern of the world. This pattern is this law of dichotomy, this good, bad, right, wrong, holy, evil. To know that all of this exists, but then to also see that we're more than that. To look at that and say, okay, I can choose to go this way, and I can choose to go this way. In order to know and to experience light, we must have to experience darkness. We must have to go through pain in order to experience pleasure. We must have to know bad or evil to know the goodness, to know the light, to know which direction we are steering that surfboard or that raft or that boat as we're rowing down the streams and in those intense rapids of our life. And then we return to that beautiful, infinite experience of all of the waters coming to those peaceful places once the waters calm down. Because they do, they eventually do. One who understands splendor while holding to humility. That's that opposite again, knowing splendor, like the splendors of the kings, but also keeping a humble heart. Acts in accord with eternal power. Knowing that sometimes we go through maybe devastating humility. Maybe we've lost everything. We've lost all of our riches. We've lost our home. We've been in the place of having to rely on other people. And in that moment, we get to experience the generosity of others, the joy and the riches of having breath in our lungs day to day, walking around as every nature is free and taking in sunshine and really reveling in the joy of the fresh air, the sunshine, water, a stream, being in nature, being in beautiful awe of trees or animals around us. So that's one who understands splendor while holding humility, acts in accord with eternal power. To be the fountain of the world is to live the abundant life of virtue. I'm going to read that again. To be the fountain of the world. I think of a geyser like Old Faithful. Old Faithful, aptly named because that geyser in that national park constantly flows this steam and this hot water, bursting it up into the air, where people travel from all over the world to see this incredible, beautiful sight of power and reliance. It's always there. It's always happening. I think it's every 30 minutes or so when Old Faithful goes off. And to see this, to be the fountain of the world, how can we be like Old Faithful in our lives? Maybe not a power pressured steam of hot water, because sometimes we are with our what do you call it, our temper, right? When we lose it, we go, ah, and then we are like Old Faithful, quite literally putting forth this really vicious energy. How can we be a fountain for the world with love, letting compassion, letting gratitude flow from our hearts, letting that be the new norm rather than fear, rather than scarcity? How do we do that on a regular basis? So to be the fountain of the world is to live the abundant life of virtue. Beautiful. When the unformed is formed into objects, its original qualities are lost. If you preserve your original qualities, you can govern anything. Truly, the best governor governs least. So what does he mean? When the unformed is formed into objects, when we are at our purest self, our childlike self, the one that's in awe, the one that's looking up, that's at the valley saying, I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't know how to make sense of this world, but I'm looking up and I'm trusting the flow of the river of life through me. The original qualities, when something's formed, the original qualities are lost. What are these original qualities in our life? When something's formed, when we start identifying with an egoic representation of ourselves, the infinite aspect of our childlike nature begins to be lost a little bit. And sometimes when we're going through these valleys in our life, we are returning to that helpless state of being a child. And we feel like there's something wrong, but what's so right about returning to that? In Hinduism, they talk about Shiva coming in and destroying everything. And this beautiful God, and we're like, well, wait a minute, God's supposed to be the one who saves me. God's supposed to be the one who makes everything better. But this face of God in Hinduism, and Shiva, is the one who destroys everything. How in this moment where we feel destroyed, where we feel like all is lost, where we return to this helpless, childlike nature, how in these moments can we still see God there, carving out our insides to feel more joy and pleasure because we have felt more pain and devastation? And in this one passage, it says, when the unformed is formed into objects, its original qualities are lost. So in accordance also with the Mother Teresa quote that I read earlier, what we could build a lifetime, what we spend a lifetime building, someone can destroy overnight. In the destruction, in those moments of devastation in our lives, how can we find how God is guiding us, how Source is guiding us, how opportunity and new perspectives are presenting themselves for the greatest good, for our soul's purpose, so that we can begin rebuilding again from scratch. But we are not completely building from scratch, right? We have all of our experience and all of the wisdom of everything that came before us. And rather than, like they say, crying over spilt milk, we're looking at that milk that's on the table and beginning to sculpt it in a new way, or using it to create what's next in our lives. Whether it be a new wisdom, a new perspective, a new tool that we know not to bump it over, or we know to build in a way that we build from joy and we create from that joyful, childlike creation or creative source, that second chakra area, where we can creatively move through our lives. And as things get destroyed and things don't work out and we have disappointments in our lives, how can we, in those moments, remind ourselves, no, we're not on the top of that mountain in that gorgeous multi-million-dollar home or with that beautiful $1,000,000 view, but we're in the valley. We're in the deepest part of that mountainous region, where the waters are pouring down to us, where the life force from the sky is pouring down to us in the rivers of our lives, directing our course, even though it's getting very tumultuous, even though we are in those intense rapids as we're moving through, and we're rowing our boat gently down the stream, merrily, reminding ourselves to do it with joy, that life is but a dream. See if you can remember that this weekend and this week ahead as you're moving through your lives, as you are facing your disappointments or the things that frustrate you or the things that are grief-stricken. How can you move through your life with joy, with trust, with leaning and reminding yourself that God is there, that you have help, that people are around you reaching out their hands so that they can help you up, and that you, when you are at those peaks and you see those struggling in the waters of life, trying to fight their own rapids, that that's your moment to reach out your hand and help them up. There is a beautiful, beautiful poem, and I'm going to paraphrase it. It's a beautiful prayer that it comes from Christianity and the Christian tradition, and it's called Footprints. And it's a very beautiful poem, and we've taken inspiration from the Tao today. We've taken inspiration from Hinduism. We've taken inspiration from Mother Teresa, who just had her saint day, her feast day on September 5th. And I'll leave you with this beautiful reminder taken from Christian tradition called Footprints. And the story goes like this. A man, after he passed, he's looking at the passage of his life represented on the beach as two sets of footprints. And he realized that one set of his footprints was his footprints walking through life, and the other footprints was God by his side. And as he was walking through his life and looking at the tumultuous times in his life, he noticed that there were only one set of footprints, and he was really bothered by this. And in the afterlife, he asked God, he said, well, God, I see that you were walking by my side throughout my entire life, but in the moments of the greatest destruction, in the moments I was struggling the most and I felt most devastated, why would you leave me at those times in my life? I noticed there's only one set of footprints at those times. How could you walk away and abandon me during those most difficult times? And God, in all of his righteousness and wisdom and beauty and love, unconditional acceptance and love, he said, son, during those most tumultuous times, I didn't walk by your side. It was then that I carried you. I remember hearing that prayer and that poem for the first time in my life, and it just rocking me to my core and reminding me that it is in those moments where we feel like we're abandoned, where we feel like we're on our own, where we feel like we're by ourselves, that nobody gets it, that we're isolated, And in those moments that we do have God carrying us, God, however you name that energy, whether it's grace, whether it's source, whether it's universal energy or love, whether it's those around you, your community who pick you up, in your tribe when you're feeling lowest, whether it's tuning in on Saturday mornings, whether I can offer you something that reminds you, that helps to carry you through your day or through this difficult time in your life. Remember that. Have a beautiful, beautiful Saturday. And I've put the quote from Mother Teresa in there. I'll put another link to the book that I absolutely love, that I've used for maybe 16, 17 years, maybe 15, 16 years, from Dr. Wayne Dyer, influenced by the Tao Te Ching, and also the links to get the essential oils and the quote footprints. All right. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard, 11 Eastern. And have a beautiful, beautiful day. All right. Bye. Keep raising the vibration.